Everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Dollar Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and today we have somebody who's been a big part of all of our childhood growing up. If you're my age, I'm 47, so if you're my age, a little younger, you're going to want to thank Stan Berkowitz. Stan Berkowitz is our guest today. He has this amazing book out called Beyond the Bat, All About His Life. Stan is a screenwriter. He has written for Batman, Batman Beyond, Superboy, Superman. I'm just reading things off here. G.I. Joe, Transformers, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Static Shock, all these wonderful cartoons that have been part of our life, and the show's been part of our life. Stan has been a part of it. He's worked with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. He has some great stories to tell. It was an absolute honor to get to speak to him. He's another guy that, we scratched the surface because there's so much he's done in his career that we want to get to. But without further ado, Mr. Stan Berkowitz. Mr. Stan Berkowitz, sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So let's start very beginning. How do you first discover comic books?
I was ill one night when I was 8 years old,
Hmm.
and my father went out to get some medicine for me. I mean, nothing terribly serious, but he went out to get medicine, and at the pharmacist, they had the comic books, so he figured keep me from getting bored. He brought back a copy of Detective Comics and a copy of Superboy. Or oh, wait a minute, it was Adventure Comics,
Hmm.
Detective and Adventure, and I had been a fan of the Superman TV show, the George Reeves thing,
Hmm.
but I was completely unaware of comic books. I don't know how that happened, but until I was 8 years old, I didn't know anything about comic books, didn't know they existed. And then there they were in my lap. And Superboy was interesting. It's a famous issue where he plays all of the positions on a baseball team.
Hmm.
And but the Batman was what fascinated me because that seemed to be more realistic
Hmm.
or less impossible than Superman.
Right.
So from that point on, I was a very very avid purchaser of comics. I was going to say collector, but I don't have them anymore.
So from there, how do you, as you get older, decide to get into screenwriting?
Well, not many years after I was 8 years old, I had a bunch of friends, as we all do.
Mhm.
A couple of them were making movies. They'd borrowed their parents' movie cameras. At that time, the only thing we had access to were silent 8 millimeter cameras, and they'd make different. They make films, usually stuff inspired by um, stuff they'd seen on TV. Shooting, killing, that kind of thing. If you've seen The Fablemans,
Mhm.
Spielberg's film from a couple of years ago, it's that kind of a world, for like preteen boys
Mhm.
mostly. So I got in through that, and so by the time I was, I think 13, I was making my own films and imposing on my friends to act in them.
It
Also
sounds.
doing some stop motion animation, which is really easy to do with that kind of camera that I'm describing.
Did you think that, the creativity you had then would lead you to where you are now?
No, well, because everybody was doing it,
Right.
but everybody, growing up in that era, everybody just assumed that we'd have what I'll call adult jobs, normal type jobs that jobs like our fathers had, maybe or maybe a little better than Dad did.
So how do you get your foot in the door writing for shows and films?
I wish I had a better answer for you, but because it took me a long time out of film school. I
Right.
had I had 2 degrees in at UCLA,
Mhm.
an MFA graduate degree, and it took from the day I got my graduate degree to the day I started making a full-time living as a writer. Ready?
Go ahead.
11 years. So it's basically having friends who are in the business, knowing people who are doing the kind of work you want to be doing, and
Mhm.
eventually a door opens if you knock long enough and on enough doors.
How long did it take you to be in the business for you to know that you made the right choice and that you're good at what you do?
That's a good question. I guess, having enough money to buy a house.
Okay.
And that took the time I was making a full-time living as a writer to the time I was able to buy the house was probably 10 years.
Okay.
So mid 40s. Well, plus, by the time you get your mid to the mid 40s, there's no turning back.
Right.
I mean, what are you gonna? Well, I guess some people do. They end up going back to law school, doing things like that.
Mhm.
But I never wanted to do anything else. There's nothing, no other type of profession ever called to me. A lot of this stuff is in that book that I sent you.
I was
The-
about to plug it. I was going to say,
oh, thank you.
I wanted to get into this book, Beyond the Bat, because it's absolutely fascinating. The stories you tell here. I have questions that I wrote down for it, and I want to get into that. But just a general question from,
Sure.
what I get from this book is every project has a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and it seems like you could start with one idea, and there's a whole different groups of people who are going to put their ideas in it as well, and what they want and what they're looking for. How do you sort of keep sane and say like, okay, I know this is going to happen. I got to keep going with this.
Well, I don't think you do keep it mean. I mean, you can talk to some of the people who've worked with me, and I think that they've had their moments, and I certainly have. There are very few instances of there not being too many cooks. You're probably referring to the chapter where I talk about the beginning of the Spider-Man animated series, where four different entities all stretching it or trying to pull it in their own direction.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of the shows are like that. There's just a standard thing where there's a studio, there's a network,
Mhm.
there's a star, maybe an actor who has his view of it or her view of it. Um, Censors are
Right.
stopping you, and then in competition between other writers, just pure egos involved. So it just becomes normal. And then when it doesn't happen, again, that would be the example in the same chapter would be at Warner's Animation, where all of those fights and arguments had been settled before I even got there. And I stepped in and I go, oh, this works pretty well. But it was because other people had fought for a long time for their vision, and then I was able to just slip right into it. The book is one of the few things somewhat not. It's not really ironic, but maybe coincidental. Um, Student films they kind of leave you alone,
Mhm.
and in the book they kind of left me alone. So, but and the difference, Jesus, now that I think about it, the difference would be about 55 years at the beginning and at the end. Hopefully not the absolute end,
Oh,
but
I was gonna say you're here right now.
being left alone to do what you wanted to do. It's hard to find and treasured, greatly treasured.
Most definitely. And one story, I'm going to get to Spider-Man, of course, but you talk about Static Shock, and
Yeah,
somebody does some research, and they say, you know what? Kids don't like villains. And
yeah.
and in the book, you said, of course they don't like villains. They like the superheroes.
You're not supposed to like them.
Right. But a decision's made. Okay, let's pull the villains out of the show. As
Yeah.
someone writing a show about superheroes, but now you can't have villains,
Hmm.
how do you pause and say, okay, how do I rework this whole thing?
Well, you start looking for another job, first of all. But again, sometimes limitations are helpful. Some shows you work on where the budget gets slashed and you have to do the whole thing, one whole episode in one location. That's live action I'm referring to.
Right.
And instead of saying, "Oh, that's just terrible, I quit," you go, "Well, that's really a challenge." And again, it was a challenge to do a story without a villain.
Mhm.
We were able to do a story where the hero's powers kind of ebbed and waned because of a sunspot instance, and it was fun to do that. But again, thinking, while you're doing that, you're going, "Well, I figured out how to do it."
Right.
But then you think, "Oh no, I'm going to have to do another one and another one after that," with that same challenge. And I was lucky enough to get on the Justice League show right after I finished the Static Shock script.
When you're doing these scripts, how do you sort of balance out who gets, I hate to say more airtime, but more lines, more, time on the show? Are you sort of given the opportunity to choose it yourself, or does DC or someone say, "Hey, we want to sort of push Hawkman on the show, or we want this one to be more focused on Superman"?
That wouldn't be DC. That would be the writers themselves
Mm,
deciding, hey, this will be a Hawkman episode. This will be a Batman episode.
mm.
Uh, that kind of thing goes on at the level of the writers.
Okay.
I imagine if we persistently ignored someone like, say, Wonder Woman,
Yeah.
eventually DC would say, "Hey, wait a minute, there is this character deserves some attention." But that never happened because we kept in mind on at DC and at Marvel that the audience likes certain characters, and we'd give them attention.
Mhm.
Um, it was we were trusted. In other words, DC or Marvel trusted us not to overemphasize one character and underemphasize another.
On Spider-Man, it was very interesting because Stan Lee is involved, and he
Yes.
wanted the show to be a lot like the comics, to have sort of the
Hmm.
dialogue, the feel of the comics. And it
Hmm.
seems like the network was like, "That's not happening. We wanted to sort of put a new twist on it." Where did and you sort of bit caught in the middle of it, the whole thing, because
Yeah.
you have Stan Lee who helped create this, but
Yeah.
you also have we were working for there. What was that situation like for you?
It's kind of repetitive. What would happen would be that Stan would ask for certain lines of dialogue to be in.
Mhm.
I'd put them in as a staff writer, working for him and for John Semper
Mhm.
and Bob Richardson. And then the network would say, "Oh, you got to fix the dialogue. It sounds, too much like the 1940s." So you do that, and then Stan would say, well, you have to put the dialogue back in. So you're being pulled back and forth, and you kind of riding in circles until often, if you find something, instead of making it one or the other, you find a third alternative,
Mhm.
and the third alternative both parties could agree on.
Right.
So it's kind of a compromise, but it seemed to work all right.
And you have a quote from Stan here that says, "It's a series of incidents, not a story," as far as,
Wonderful quote. I mean, it's great to. I think everybody who's starting to be a writer should hear that quote.
right.
He's making an argument in favor of a story that says something.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, especially when you're a child, you look at something. I mean, I having been one and
Right.
I grew up, as I said, on the Superman thing,
Mhm.
um, uh, on cowboy movies from even an earlier era. And as a child, you watch and you go, you think, oh, talking, blah 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 blah. Oh, fight, fight, fight. I like this part. Then
Right.
blah 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 blah. Then fight, fight, fight. It's that limited when you're a child. But
Mhm.
Stan, to his credit, I believe, insisted that the stories mean something and that they have something to say, and that if you watch the whole thing as not a 4-year-old, but maybe a 14-year-old, you'd get a sense of what the writer was trying to say about life and the characters.
And to that extent, when you're writing a show like this, that it's going to carry a broad spectrum of viewers, you don't want to speak down to your audience because they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" But you also want to go over their heads because you are going to have younger viewers and stuff. How do you sort of work to get that medium where it's something that it's palatable for a broader audience?
But you don't always do that.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes you fail because you're describing it almost like a recipe,
Mhm.
and sometimes you put a little too much oregano in, or sometimes you don't put enough oregano in.
Mhm.
Um, I think I was just at a convention in Cincinnati, and people were coming up to me, and Alan Burnett and Dan Reba,
Mhm.
who had also worked on DC animated stuff,
Mhm.
and just constantly saying, "Oh, I grew up on that show, Batman animated, and all the other ones that like Superman and Justice League that had come from that show. I
Mhm.
grew up on that, and I still look at it, and it still really works today." And
Right.
you hear that over and over and over again. And the goal at that time was to do a show that children would like, but that they could watch with their parents, and the parents wouldn't have their intelligence insulted. So you're walking a tightrope.
Mhm.
And in fact, and I personally have experience where having to, having fallen off that tightrope,
Mhm.
where the Superboy TV series, which was my first effort to write superhero television, where that one it had a fairly big audience of children, and they brought me in to try to make it more adult, and
Mhm.
I think that we were never able to make it sufficiently adult that adults would watch it, and yet we made it a bit too adult for little children to watch. Although we still get a few comments on that one too.
What was that experience like for you as a young writer being on that show? I mean, what was
Which show?
Superboy?
I wasn't young, but
Oh,
I
but
can
I
tell you,
mean,
I can tell you what it was like. It was for me, it was kind of mid-career.
okay.
Um, the It was really difficult, again, because you had different people wanting to pull it in different directions, and you had to satisfy everybody. And then the ratings come out, and you go, "Oh my God, what have we done? We somehow have to make it better and appeal more." I think that the problem we ran into was that no adult would want. I shouldn't say no adult, but most adults are not inclined to watch something with the word boy in it.
Right.
So,
How long, in your experience, does how much rope does a show usually get with the ratings before a decision is made to keep it and think there's potential there, or it's just not worth pushing forward?
well, again, that's a tightrope that executives walk on.
Mhm.
They might see potential among the writers, among the show. Maybe they see one of the actors as being a kind of a breakout performer. But you never know. You never know how much rope you're going to get until it until the trap swings open and you start feeling a lot of pressure around your neck.
For you personally, was there one project that you kind of felt like you came into your own on, confident wise and as a writer?
Maybe Batman Beyond.
Okay.
It was personal for me because that's a show about a very old man being a mentor to a very young man. And
Mhm.
when I came aboard that show, I was almost exactly halfway between the very young guy and the very old guy.
Mhm.
And it was easy to relate to the kid,
Right.
kind of an insolent kid, thinks he knows everything.
Mhm.
And it was growing more and more easy to relate to the very old man who was kind of bitter. He didn't wasn't at the height of his powers anymore,
Mhm.
but still felt that he knew best. He knew better than what the kid knew.
Right.
And writing for those two characters is a lot of fun for me.
When you have a show like that, that is sort of a new take and a new version of the story, is it a lot more freedom for you writing because there's not so much back history as, a regular Batman or a regular Superman where fans might be like, well, no, in this comic book they did this, that with a newer story like this, you can sort of take it in different directions.
That's a really good point you make. Yes, a lot more freedom to do that.
Mhm.
The limitation was you had to make it into a future that seemed reasonable from where we were to what might be in the future.
Mhm.
And I think the other writers and I did a pretty good job of making it a reasonable future. Um, uh, and we did have that. We had that kind of latitude.
Mhm.
I think also because we had the executives at Warner Brothers and the executives, I should say the executive singular at Warner Brothers Animation and the executive at Kids WB. It's the same person, Gene McCurdy. So we didn't have to worry about the network fighting with the studio. Very, very fortunate in that regard. And very supportive. She kind of left us alone.
I say it has to be also sort of nerve-wracking because when you're introducing a new character like that, there might be backlash. There might be people who like their Batman this way. How did you sort of want to create or put the character together in a way that would hook into viewers?
Well, I didn't, I only worked a little bit on the pilot.
Mhm.
So, the show was not my idea. The original idea was to show Batman, Bruce Wayne as a young man
Okay.
starting out. And then it morphed into this. and I think this is a better choice. I mean, later on they did, Batman's first year, a show called The Batman
Mhm.
that I also wrote for. But I like the idea of setting it in the future because, as you're pointing out, there was no context
Right.
for anyone to say, well, there'd be Luther here, there'd be the Joker there. They were all gone.
Right.
So we created our own new world, and people seem to relate to it.
And it's
Pretty
something that
cool.
continues to this day. I mean, there are fans out there. There's, a lot still folks talk about it, and it's sort of one of those revered shows that came out and has sort of lasted the test of time.
It did because again, it was another one that was written so that a kid who's watching for fight, 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 talk, 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 fight, 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 talk, 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 they could enjoy it, but the parents could also enjoy the talk,
Right.
and they understood it, and they could relate to it. I felt.
Do you, did the writers have any say as to casting, as far as voice work goes for the characters, or is that strictly done by, the higher ups?
Well, the producers.
Yeah.
I mean, the producers on certainly at Warner's Animation,
Mhm.
and also at my experience at Marvel. It's not like they're just some, bean counting executives. They
Right.
are huge, huge fans of the comic books.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not as if they have an entirely different view of it than the writers do.
Okay.
The writers are also fans, and we all want it we all want the best choices for the actors.
Right. What is there one project that kind of slipped by that you wish you would been part of or been on for a little longer than you were?
Trying to think of one. I, well, yeah, I mean there are ideas I've had for series and for movies and things that never got off the ground.
Okay.
That's in the book too, by the way. But
Yeah.
um, as far as a series that I envied, I mean, you see stuff on TV and you go, oh, yeah, I'd like to work on that show, and then it just doesn't work out. They've got other people they want.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's always like that.
One thing I found interesting was the Mike Hammer story because
Yeah.
it just seemed
Yes.
like a series of unfortunate events that just kept
Mhm.
happening with this. Uh,
Yeah.
and again, I recommend folks buy the book to find out all the details. But this one, it seemed like a great idea, and then there's off-camera stuff that happened with Stacy Keach. There's changes that are being made, and I know, for you, you were, I think they said script writer for that on that project,
I would have been a story editor.
story editor.
The first time everything went down the tubes, I was a staff writer, and the second time everything went down the tubes, I was a story editor. So I've progressed.
There you go.
So the tube was slightly the tube was worse the second time.
I mean, it was disappointing. I mean, did you think that the show, if everything had clicked the way it was supposed to, could have had the potential to be, one of the top shows on the network?
No, I mean it was kind of the idea was kind of archaic. I mean the point was you had a character who was a walking anachronism. He was kind of a 1940s tough guy living in 1986.
Right.
But also the show itself didn't feel like a modern show.
Hmm.
It didn't feel like you were watching film noir from the 40s, but it didn't feel that it was in the same world as other shows that were on at the same time, like Miami Vice, St. Elsewhere, Hill Street Blues. Those seemed like modern shows, and Mike Hammer seemed like something that could have been made even in the 1960s.
Right.
So I don't think we missed a great hit there.
Do you prefer working on live action over an animated show, or are they both pretty much equal for you?
There's less stress and pressure on animation, much less, because you don't. I mean, there's another scene in the book where I'm pulled out of a meeting to go to the set because of a prop that was poorly designed. I'll leave it to the readers to buy that book if they want to find out what kind of a prop it was, and I guarantee they won't be disappointed. But you have to fix the problem right then and there because there's a whole staff and a whole crew waiting to shoot, and the more they're standing around waiting, the more money is lost.
Right.
So there's enormous amount of pressure, and there's much more money at stake too.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of pressure. Um, Years after that, had been working at Warner's Animation, and I got a job offer to work on a live action Dick Wolf show,
Hmm.
but only for a set period.
Hmm.
And I left Warner's. They kept my office open for me.
Hmm.
I was there for Dick Wolf for about 6 months, but believe me, I was very happy to get back to Warner's at the end of the 6 months.
Wow.
I like the people actually. A
Right.
lot of it's just I got along better with the people at Warner's.
How?
With some exceptions, obviously. I mean, there were people I liked at Dick Wolf's place. I got
Mhm.
to work with Ice-T,
All
great
right.
guy, and we soon after that hired him to do a voice for Warner's Animation.
That's pretty awesome.
It was cool. He's a good guy to work with.
And you mentioned before pressure. For you, how did you handle the pressure? Because there's a lot of money behind
Poorly,
these shows.
poorly.
There you go.
Okay.
I mean, it's just got to be tough. And it seems like there's not a lot of downtime because you have to keep thinking about the next thing and the next thing,
Right.
and putting out fires here and there.
Yeah.
It seems like it eats up whatever personal time you might have. You really have to put
Oh
in.
no, there's no personal time at all.
Wow.
I learned that on the first thing I ever worked on, where I was a crewman. The guy who clapped the slate.
Mhm.
And you think of 9 to 5 jobs. This is 5 to 9.
Yeah.
As soon as you wake up, you're thinking about it, and then you get home if you're lucky at 9 o'clock. You go to sleep, and you wake up and go right back to work. You don't have time for personal stuff usually.
Wow.
If you have time for a lot of personal stuff, you're not being utilized very well. The Mike Hammer chapter talks also about a guy who was kind of at the end of his career, and regarding handling pressure, what he ended up doing was just destroying the whole thing, just stopping production.
Yeah.
So that seemed to be not very professional. But again, who might have complained? The guy had wonderful credits for a long time
Mhm.
and ended up kind of embarrassing himself, I felt.
Is there, they say sometimes, and without getting into specifics, but a sort of don't meet your heroes sort of thing where people we've all heard of, people we know, you get a chance to work with them, big names, and sometimes it seems like it's tougher to work with them than maybe folks had imagined.
Yeah, it's good to keep away from. You're talking about the William Shatner chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just he never became close friends with anybody.
Mhm.
Everybody just kind of shied away from him.
Right.
I mean, he was the star of the show. You have to acknowledge that. He
Right.
was why people watched the show.
Mhm.
But you maintained a distance
Right.
for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Where do you think you get your creativity from to come up with stories for all these different genres, for different characters, and for as long a career as you've had? Where do you think your inspiration for storytelling comes from?
Well, generally, not just for me, but probably for a lot of my colleagues, it comes from watching other shows
Hmm.
and growing up immersed in media. Because my generation would be the first one that had television. For my parents' generation, if you wanted to see stories, they'd go to the movies maybe once a week.
Hmm.
I don't go to the movies that often,
Right.
quite that often, but I do. The TV's on all the time, and it was certainly on all the time when I was growing up,
Hmm.
and literally from the age of three.
Hmm.
From the age of three, we had a television, and I'd have it on all the time. I actually had my own television
Hmm.
at a fairly young age. Um, so that's part of it, and then maybe a person might um, be prone to have fantasies a lot.
Hmm.
Maybe their own life isn't that exciting, and maybe they fantasize a lot.
And so you come up with things from there.
Yeah, what would you want to have happen? Or
Right.
maybe you don't get along. Maybe you don't get along in life very well. I
Hmm.
remember talking to someone who wanted to write but didn't know what to write about. And I said, well, what in life makes you angry?
Hmm.
What kind of a thing makes you angry? Write about that.
Right.
So I guess I'm angrier than the average person, if that's true.
Are you able to go back and watch shows you've written for? Because I know there's some people who, whether it be, writing or art, they have a hard time looking at what they've created. Are you able to go back and watch what you've done and enjoy it without being like, oh, I wish I should have changed this and that?
There is that element where, but you don't feel like, oh my God, the thing was terrible. I'm sorry I wrote it. You think, oh, that line should be changed or that line should be changed. It's
Mhm.
not, you look, I don't remember a lot of the stuff. I'm doing an interview for a podcast called Justice League Revisited in a
Mhm.
couple days. And the episode that they want to talk about, I have no memory of. So between now and then, I will look at it in order to be able to talk about it. I have a general idea of what it was like, but my memory is, this stuff goes back 35 years.
I was going to say.
And generally speaking, if you have enough to do,
Mhm.
if you're keeping busy in your career, you don't have time to look back.
Right.
You're moving forward all the time. So I'm grateful that the folks over at Justice League Revisited have given me an opportunity to review my stuff. Also, there's something called the Watchtower database,
Okay.
again, where they talk about episodes, and I have to watch them. I have to rewatch them. Sometimes there wasn't even an opportunity to watch the episodes uh, at the time.
Mhm.
So because you're moving so fast, and they don't. It's not like they have a screening of them every week. When they finish editing them, you do your work, and then they air. And if you're busy when they air, you don't see it.
Does it, I mean, when does it hit you the impact you've had on people's lives with your stories? Because, like you're talking right now, there's different podcasts. They want to talk to you about stories you've written that what you've done has influenced and become part of their DNA.
The conventions. I've been going to conventions to promote the book, and a lot of times, in different cities. I was just in Cincinnati, and before that, Dallas. And then they had a convention in my hometown in LA, and
Mhm.
people constantly come up and use this. They use the same phrase: "You made my childhood."
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that, and it's really good to know that the stuff still holds up, because the stuff that made my childhood really did not hold up very well. I mean, if you're a superhero guy, you've probably seen the old serials from the 1940s, specifically and sadly the Batman serials.
Mhm.
Because remember I told you it's like in 1958 I start reading Batman
Right.
comic books, and then around that time I go to the local theater and they're still showing Batman serials
Right.
from, even though they're what is it, 15 years old at that time, the serials. They're still running them. And even as a 10-year-old, I'm looking at it, this is terrible. This is, you can't show that to a modern audience. And by modern audience, I mean a 10-year-old. When a 10-year-old thinks this is crap,
Right.
you've done something wrong. But it it feels a lot better when someone my age hears that the stuff that they've done so many years ago still resonates and people can still look at it. And we've run into I've run into parents who are young enough to be my children,
Mhm.
who have children of their own, little kids who are seeing the show and going, yeah, this works, this is good.
Yeah, I think you're the perfect person to ask this question to, because I've asked it of others. Because you spoke about your own experience, and it's similar to me when Superman with Christopher Reeve came out. We ran out, we bought the comic books. When Batman
Right.
'89 came out, everyone wanted to get as many Batman comics as they can. We're
Right.
living in this huge world of DCU and MCU,
Yes.
and you ask people, what's your favorite comic? And they say, oh, I don't read the comics. I like the movies.
Right.
Things are dwindling now.
For
Is that
comic books, for sure.
most definitely, is there a bridge that can be built again between these films and the comics, or is it just two different worlds at this point?
It's a sad thing that children don't read comics anymore.
Hmm.
I mean, that's when was the last time kids read comics?
Right.
To my knowledge,
Hmm.
the bridge in comics is that the artwork.
Hmm.
When a child or my say me at age 8,
Right.
you don't think you can make a movie when you're 8 years old, but when
Hmm.
you see a physical comic book in front of you, you think, well, I could draw that. I mean, what kid didn't take tracing paper and just trace the drawings in the comic books? You see, it's something that you could do, and maybe it'll get you interested in art, maybe, or maybe it'll get you into superheroes. But I think that now, why bother to read? Why bother to spend all that money to read something which might be censored too? Because, are there a lot of kids' comic books out there that you would feel comfortable handing to an 8-year-old? Probably not. And how would they discern, when they go to a comic book store, how would they discern that this is for kids? I don't know. I don't even know how they do that anymore. If you talk to J.M. DeMantis, Mark DeMantis, he'll say the same thing. It's like, geez, he and I would wish that there would be comic books for children to get them started, and it may be an entry to art
Right.
for kids too.
If you were given absolute freedom,
Yeah,
um,
right. Sure.
I mean,
Keep
let's just
going.
say they come to you and they say, "Listen, we want you to see your crack at Superman."
Hmm.
Would you change much of what we know already? Origin story, abilities,
Yeah,
personality?
I do. Yes, I do an Elseworld story.
Okay.
There'd be I wouldn't give him all that hypnotic power, the power to travel through time that Christopher Reeve had.
Right.
I'd make him much more down to earth. I think the original idea was that there are people who are raised in higher climates, like at the top of the Andes,
Mhm.
and because they're used to thin air, when they get down to sea level,
Mhm.
the oxygen is like supercharging them, so they have more power and power and ability to quote a famous script. Um, I would make it more like that, I think,
Mhm.
less powerful. And I would change the whole origin just for fun. It's been done. I'm surprised that they haven't, that they're still going back to characters created in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Or in Stan Lee's, the case with the Marvel stuff, the early 1960s.
Right.
Come on, new stuff, guys, new stuff.
I mean, if an opportunity presented itself, though, for you to
Yes.
write a comic book,
Yeah, I would do an Elseworlds where the origin would be entirely different. Like maybe, what if you're talking only about Superman?
oh no, it just any character you want or your own creation. I mean, if someone came to you and said, Stan, we want to see, we love what you do with the animation.
Hmm.
We'd love to see what you would do in a comic. Would that be an opportunity you'd be interested in doing?
Yes, I would love to do Elseworld stories. I would love to do one where, what if Krypton hadn't blown up?
Mhm.
What if that Joe Chill, what if his gun had jammed?
Right.
And then follow the stories and still somehow turn them both into the superheroes that they became, but from a very, very different origin.
Do you think the animated products that Marvel and DC put up in the 90s and the early thousands set the groundwork for where we are right now as far as the superhero boom that we're in?
They seem to have.
Yeah.
And I think certainly for Marvel, because Avi Arad sat in that room. In the book, there's a scene where he's at a story meeting. I think Avi was learning how to do that stuff.
Mhm.
I think he went there to learn how those stories worked and see the mechanics of it, so that he could eventually produce the stuff that he ended up producing, those huge blockbusters.
Right.
Um, so yeah, certainly for Marvel. DC, they'd already had huge success with Superman and then more recently Batman.
Mhm.
So I don't know um, that we set the groundwork for it.
Mhm.
And when you look at the stories, the scripts for the live action features, I don't have a feeling that they looked at our shows at all. I don't think they found much inspiration in the stories that were done for animation, and that was their loss, actually.
When you keep seeing these reboots and reboots,
Yes.
of things, and you look at what you guys did that worked, that lasts, that
Mhm.
connected with an audience, and that still connects with an audience, you would think you guys would be a great blueprint to say, okay, how do they handle these characters? How they put this story together?
I think James Gunn in the new Superman did a little bit of that
Mhm.
because I detect a little bit of the flavor of the animated stuff,
Mhm.
particularly the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. A
Mhm.
little bit of that in the new film. Um, Not a lot. I mean, it's still mostly James Gunn's attitude, his sense of humor.
Right.
But maybe I'm pretty sure he did see our stuff though.
Oh, I would think so. How difficult this is, jumping back a bit. We were speaking about with the Spider-Man show. How tough is it to tell Stan Lee, listen, I know you want this, but we can't do it exactly this way.
It wasn't tough at all. I mean, he never pulled rank. It just felt like he was another writer. To his credit, um, he never, said, "Look, I'm Stan Lee. You have to do it my way." He never said that.
Right.
If you had an idea he liked, he'd say he liked it.
Mhm.
And if you had an idea he didn't like, he would say he didn't like it, and he'd tell you why. And he always had a very critical story editor's view of it,
Mhm.
and his disapproval would be logical.
Right. Could you
But,
talk?
he became the legendary figure after the mid 90s, more around 2000 or so, where, God forbid you should argue with him. But when I was there, he acted and, to his credit, behaved like just another writer in the room.
When you're working on a project, do you do research prior to writing?
What kind of research? I mean,
I just as far as, reading some of the old
oh
comics.
yeah, for sure, for sure. DC in particular, Warner's Animation rather, they had a stack of the old comics, and
Mhm.
when we started doing Justice League, I'd go back to the stuff that I grew up on. In other
Mhm.
words, right, I think to the first Starro issue,
Mhm.
and then beyond that. Unfortunately, not a lot of it's very good
Really?
to me.
Yeah.
Looking back, there wasn't a lot you could use.
Okay.
Um, do you remember the Amazo story? The creature that it was an android who absorbed the powers of the different members of the Justice
Oh,
League.
yes, yes, yes. Yep.
Well, look at the one Warner's did for the design of the android
Mhm.
versus the one that was in the comic book.
Right.
The one in the comic book, as I recall, looked like a one of those like a Middle Eastern genie,
Yeah.
and it just no. And the trick at the very end was that Green Lantern, to make himself invulnerable to the green ring that the android had, was he snorted a little bit of yellow chlorine gas,
Mhm.
and so the ring had no effect on him, but he pretended that it had an effect so that he could ambush the creature later. And you just go, oh no, I can't use any of that. I mean, there's very little we could use except for the very general idea
Mhm.
of Android duplicating the powers, yeah, duplicating the powers of the Justice League.
Makes sense. Is there a character that you wanted to work on that you hadn't gotten to or it just never got brought up? Comic character, I should say.
I mean, a superhero.
Yep.
No, I mean we had so many of them.
Right.
Um, you know, everything I could have ever wanted to work on, I did work on,
Right.
uh, or use as characters. I wish again, my inclination is toward Elseworld stories,
Mhm.
where you drastically change one aspect or another of the character and then go from there and see how it would have turned out had this not happened or had that happened.
Could you, I mean, is there an opportunity for you to be doing these things? I mean, we've seen other ones, we've seen Superman under the Red Sun, we've seen other sort of Elseworld stories come to light in animation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, we've done Elseworld stories in animation and also in live action.
right,
They went in other dimensions, and you met different versions of Superboy,
right.
um, who had done different things that caused them. They had taken different paths in life.
Hmm.
So I'd still be open to doing Elseworlds work, but I haven't heard anything from anybody.
All right. So I know right now you're out, you're promoting this book, which
Yes,
is available on Amazon.
Amazon. Yeah.
Uh, what other things can fans look forward to? How can they keep in contact with what's going on and events and stuff like that?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and in at Thanksgiving time. When will this be
We'll
available?
probably put in the next couple of weeks. So it'll be
Yes.
before Thanksgiving. Yep.
Yeah, so Thanksgiving time, I'll be in San Francisco
Hmm.
at the event there in the Moscone Center at Thanksgiving time.
Hmm.
And I'll be at the Heroic Fine Art table somewhere at the convention in
Hmm.
Moscone West. And after that, maybe other conventions. As I said, I just came back from Cincinnati.
Hmm.
They're very, very well run convention, and then from a very nice convention in Dallas. So just traveling around, promoting, meeting people. It's always interesting to meet people who grew up on this stuff.
Well, I was going to say, like,
Like you, I presume.
yes, I mean, as I said before, the impact your writing and creativity had on us is something that's going to last us a lifetime, and we hope to move on to our children. So we can't thank you enough for your creativity and the time, and as we said before, the sacrifice that goes into creating all these wonderful stories for us.
Well, we were well paid, so there wasn't
Oh,
much
there you go. That helped.
sacrifice. Which one was your gateway drug? What was your gateway drug?
I would have to say it'd probably be Batman Beyond
Really?
because I just thought, like you said, it was a new take on a known entity,
Hmm.
but it was so well done, and it was, as I mentioned before, it was intelligent. It didn't talk down. The stories just kept going, and you've got yourself like enthralled with the characters. Like you wanted to see where they were going to go next, and they were, each one had sort of bumps in the road. They weren't perfect people. There was
Yeah, yeah,
growing that came with it, and I think that's what was so interesting because sometimes you see superheroes and they're perfect. They don't make mistakes. They're going to save the day, and it's going to be a challenge. They got to figure out how to take out this bad guy, but besides that, they're going to get the job done, and it's nice to see that sort of realism that sort of hooks you in.
good. And you were a little kid when you first saw it.
I was probably in my teens,
Okay, that's the
so
age. Yeah.
little
Right.
kid, I was watching Super Friends, so it was a big
Well,
difference between.
yeah, not maybe not that big of a difference because Alan Burnett, who uh, was the head writer on the Batman the animated series,
Mhm.
did write some stuff for Super Friends,
Yeah,
but he'd gotten, in doing that, he was getting frustrated and wanted to do something more adult,
yeah.
and that's where he graduated into Batman the animated series.
Watching Super Friends now, they have it on MeTV Tunes. I love it for the emotional aspect, but
Yeah,
story-wise, for a lot of these things,
yeah,
it's knocking your head against a wall sometimes because it is so formulaic. But that's what you had to do. That's what they want to do with younger people. They didn't want them to get, you know, too confused.
right. That's what drew me to Warner's because when I was at Marvel, I would watch the Batman animated series and
Mhm.
really admired Well, I admired a lot of it. Of course, the artwork, the character design, the backgrounds, but the story structure I especially admired because it was they were so well conceived. Um, always a surprise.
Mhm.
Well, not always, but usually a surprise, and very intelligent, and yet there was still plenty of action to keep the kids interested.
Agree. And they had that kind of pulp feel. And
Yes, yes, Paul, a little film noir.
exactly with the shadowing and the villains felt like villains. They weren't overly menacing. You didn't feel threatened by them,
They
but you
felt like real people.
right.
Yeah.
And everything about how that show was put together, and the shows you worked on as well, the voices and stuff, just very well cast. And you
Hmm.
didn't sit there and be like, well, I don't think so and so would be like that. No, you just kind of went along with it.
Yes, yes.
I think sometimes too much we fanboy, especially now when we see these trailers come out and it's 90 seconds of an upcoming movie, and suddenly everyone screams and yells that this isn't the way so and so would do this, isn't how they would talk, and we don't give it a chance because there's a whole movie coming out. We're only watching a little bit of it. And we're back. That is, I mean, it's so cool to see how these shows get put together. His thoughts on it, Batman Beyond sort of uh, changed the story arc so much for Batman, but it has just been loved and loved for years and years. And it's just a wonderful tribute to Stan and his writing and all the people involved in the show. And again, we'd love to have Stan back on just to talk more and more about what he's accomplished. So, guys, like I said, please pick up Beyond the Bat. It's on Amazon. It is worth reading. I have bookmarked a number of pages here for things that I was curious about to ask him. I didn't get to all of them. I hope I will someday, and we'll go from there. So, have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you next week. Bye.